It already was. Huh. And then we do this chant here. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. Whatever the virtues of the many fields of knowledge, all are steps in the path of omniscience. May these arise in the clear mirror of intellect. O Manjushri, please accomplish this. Good evening, welcome. Tonight we go through the section called Contemporary Masters of Dzogchen Mahamudra. That starts on unnumbered page 243 of the book called Shamatha Vipassana Anthology of Pith Instructions. First we have an amazing teacher named Domang Yangtang Rinpoche. And I was fortunate enough to be involved with the New York Shambhala Center years ago when... Can you guys hear me? Is this working at all, these guys? Okay, now you hear me better? Okay. These guys need to be charged. Good. No, that's not right. Sorry. I don't know if Cyprian, you remember or were there when this teacher came. But we had two amazing teachers, Nyingma teachers, that came to New York Shambhala Center during, I guess it was the early 2000s or so, and one was Yangtang Rinpoche, the other was Adi Rinpoche. And I don't know how they came to come. Well, we were like a central place that teachers would come and teach at for their own communities, and they came and used our space, and they were amazing. So this one, born on January 10, 1930, in the region of Western Sikkim, which is a separate state of, or is a state within Northeast India, but borders Tibet. Recognized the Tulku as a young age, one of two incarnations of Tirtan Dorje Jechen Lingpa. And Dorje Jechen Lingpa was an incarnation of Lhatsam Namka Jikme, who was regarded as an incarnation of both Vimalamitra from the 9th century and the Great Master Longchenpa, along with, I think, many others have been recognized as incarnations of these two masters. After being identified, he was taken to the monastery, started studying, became close friends with the contemporary Tulku Domang Gyaltro Rinpoche, with whom he would be reunited many decades later. So the translator doesn't explain this here, but Gyaltro Rinpoche was the Dzogchen teacher that Alan Wallace was directed to, I believe, by the Dalai Lama, but anyway, somehow ended up studying with and becoming his sort of second root teacher, in particular for Dzogchen teachings. Second after the Dalai Lama was his first root Lama. And for Gyaltro Rinpoche, Alan Wallace translated many texts, and the Gyaltro Rinpoche's teachings on those texts, and was then not only given permission by Gyaltro Rinpoche to teach those texts, but requested by him to do so. And that's partly why we have this book. And Gyaltro Rinpoche was centered in California, Berkeley, and also in Oregon, and died just a couple of years ago, unfortunately. And was married for many years to Sarah Condro, and not Sarah Condro, Sanjay Condro, amazing Western translator. Let's see. Yongchen Choku moved to a remote mountainside when Tibet was defeated. He thought he should leave Tibet, but his root guru, one of his root gurus, Drupchen Lingtrul, who's from this Lingtrul monastery in far eastern Tibet that I went to one day, whatever the Chinese might do to him, he should let them do it. And if he had to experience great suffering, he would do so in prison, but he should not flee. And so like the other one, Adi Rinpoche, he spent many years in prison and underwent enormous hardship and never for a minute expressed or experienced any anger or desire for don't get mad, get even. What's it called? For retribution or whatever. He only felt compassion for them. He helped others who were starving and suffering. He would manifest food in the next paragraph miraculously. And also when he was being tortured, he would repeat mantras and texts, but without it making any indication, because otherwise he would have been tortured even further. And finally he was released from prison in 1979, so 20 years in prison after the death of Mao Zedong, and returned to that monastery, discovering that it was demolished in 81. He traveled back to his birthplace and then wandered throughout India, receiving teachings from Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, Dujum Rinpoche, Dodrip Shan Rinpoche, and Pano Rinpoche. In 85, Domon Gyaltro Rinpoche and his interpreter, Sanjay Condro, and consort were staying in Bodhnath, Nepal, and learned that Yongchen Rinpoche was there performing circumambulations. They immediately ran to meet him in a joyful reunion. And over the next 30 years, Yongchen Rinpoche shared the wisdom of the Dharma throughout the world. 2,000 empowerments and innumerable oral transmissions. He was a renowned master of the Nyingma Dzogchen tradition and embraced the heart essence of the Dharma and Pith Instructions of the Great Perfection. His teachings ranged from mind training, bodhicitta, guru yoga, and the four reminders, among many other sublime instructions, implying Dzogchen instructions. Let's see, his teachings were fresh and not like reading from a book, like we're doing. He practiced Dharma continuously, constantly reciting mantras whenever, and he only slept 3 hours a night from 9 p.m. to midnight. After he would rise again and practice, and indomitable stamina and exquisite precision. Passed into nirvana in 2016 in India, and leaving a vast spiritual legacy. On the last page, 246, many lamas placed restrictions on who was allowed to read Dzogchen texts, as I think all of us know. And here's what Yongchen Rinpoche said prior to granting his oral commentary on his own composition, a summary of the view, meditation, and conduct, which follows. In times past, when people had leisure, one might take as long as 3 years for the Lama to examine carefully the students to see whether they were truly qualified. And then it was up to the students to examine the Lama to see whether the Lama was a suitable teacher for that student. But now we don't have that time, we don't have that leisure and opportunity. So it's much more important the essential ingredient is that we have faith, devotion, devotion once again, and that makes up for much of the formal process of connection that used to be required. And so we find that today, that where many Dzogchen teachings are taught quite openly, or surprisingly much more openly than they would have been in Tibet in ancient times. Summary of the View, Meditation, and Conduct, text number 19 by Domang Yongtong Rinpoche. Soul Bindu, timeless, eternal protector, all-pervasive Lord of all the families of Buddha's Guru Vajradhara, you know all. Should I earnestly and single-pointedly pray to you, please grant your blessing that the lineage of the enlightened view may strike my heart. So that's a little indication of sort of the inspiration or the theme of this text, striking the heart. That's reminiscent of a famous text by Garab Dorje, the first human teacher of the Nyingma lineage, whose famous text was the 3 words that strike the heart, which he gave to his main student. After he passed away, his main student, Manju Sri Mitra, I believe, maybe Sri Simha, I can't keep those guys straight, was distraught and crying, and Garab Dorje then appeared out of a cloud and said, "Don't despair," and handed him a little amulet box, and in that box was the text called the 3 words that strike from the heart. And then there were a series of them. That person, whether it was Sri Simha or Manju Sri Mitra, did the same thing for their next student, either Manju Sri Mitra or Sri Simha, who then did it for the next ones in the line. So there's a series of these. They're called the Deje, which means the precious thing that comes afterwards, after the life. You have obtained a human life, which is difficult to find, have aroused the intention of a spirit of emergence. So there's these texts, the 7 nails of, what is it, Sri Singha, and the 5 teachings of Manju Sri Mitra. And those were similarly these posthumous texts that were given to their disciples. And those are translated, and you can get those and read them. Let's see. You've aroused intention of a spirit of emergence, difficult to arouse, met a qualified guru, difficult to meet, encountered the sublime Dharma, difficult encounter, reflect again on the difficulty of obtaining such a fine human life. If you don't make this meaningful, it will be like a butter lamp in the wind of impermanence. Do not count on this lasting a long time. At death, if you have no confidence that you will be liberated in the intermediate period, then how much will you fear the miseries of future lives? Then you will have to wander in endless samsara. When you contemplate the nature of this, you will be disillusioned. If you can try your best to gain confidence in this life, I would be most grateful. This is my hope for you. The view. If you wish to look into the mirror of the actual nature of your mind, do not look outward, rather look inward. Looking outward involves the delusion of reification. By looking inward, you observe your own mind. Do not follow after past thoughts or anticipate thoughts to come. So we hear this phrase all the time, and it's in the famous 6 precepts from Tilopa. Don't think about the past, don't anticipate the future. And somehow, this time when I read this, it struck me a little bit differently in that normally I would think, don't think about the past meant like, okay, don't have like any memories that I dwell upon in meditation, and don't have any plans for the future that I think about. But I think it also more specifically means when you're meditating, don't think of the immediate past thought. Like, don't think of the moment just before this moment. But see if you can remain vividly in the present without even then anticipating like the next breath, the next thought moment. Look at this instruction on a very micro level, very granular level of like right now, as opposed to being some sort of general thing about don't think about your mother and your history and your past or whatever and so forth, but just like really precise. As soon as you direct your mind inward upon itself loosely, rest right there without fixing or modifying anything in the slightest. So the tendency again is like you look inward and there's like this tendency to want to hold something, like hold on to like some present or some inner experience. But rest loosely, rest loosely rest. The natural settling of thoughts is a way of resting, but it is not the main practice. So this is a necessary stage, the way, this natural settling of thoughts. And that seems like the main practice because it's so difficult to do. And we spend, probably all of us spend all of our time trying to make that happen. But it's the lead up to the main practice. But in that very way of resting, you are ready to encounter pristine awareness, which is the main practice. So there's like this subtle, going back to the past and the future, there's this very subtle, slippery way of resting without being too tight and too loose. That is the way to encounter pristine awareness, which is the main practice. As soon as you rest in your natural state, thoughts spontaneously cease and depart. So if you actually are able to identify and rest in primordial awareness, the natural state, then thoughts will immediately evaporate. The natural lucidity of thoughts, what remains when they disappear. So when thoughts disappear, their natural luminosity, their natural lucidity remains. Whatever that means, think, what does that mean? Does that mean they leave like a residue? Or is it like certain thoughts leave a certain type of lucidity and other thoughts leave a different type of lucidity? What is this lucidity that remains when the thoughts themselves disappear? And I think it's just this aspect of lucidity, of knowingness, which is the companion to the emptiness. And it's not different for different types of thoughts, and it's always there, even when thoughts are there, but we don't really notice them, at least as much until thoughts sort of dissolve. And this is the empty, transparent, essential nature of mind. So this empty, luminous nature of mind. An experience arises that is like space without anything on which to focus and free of falling to any extreme. So this is precisely the point of meditation, and it's talked about in so many different ways in so many contexts, starting with in the Prajnaparamita Sutras, giving rise to a mind that does not dwell anywhere. Just being able to remain cognizant without it being cognizant of something, cognizant in something, just cognizant. An experience arises that is like space without anything on which to focus, free of falling to any extreme. So this empty essential nature is the Dharmakayas. So the empty nature of the mind, the spacious quality, is the Dharmakaya. And then right there in that emptiness is the clear and lucid manifest nature of mind. That's the lucidity. That is the nature of thoughts and the nature of the mind when thoughts depart. So it has an empty essence and a lucid nature, devoid of any substantial characteristics of which you can say this, its own spacious and unimpeded luminosity, which is naturally clear, is the Sambhogakaya. So our mind is the Trikaya, the two kayas. The Dharmakaya is the empty aspect of mind, and the Rupakaya or Sambhogakaya is the luminous aspect. There is no other perceiver of this of this luminous, empty, pristine awareness. Hold on. There's no other perceiver of this luminous, empty, pristine awareness. Those two qualities, that which is perceived is the empty Dharmakaya. So the empty aspect is the reflective, the spacious, all-encompassing quality of mind, and that which perceives, that knows, is the luminous primordial consciousness. These two may be called emptiness and luminosity. They may also be called absolute space and primordial consciousness, or Dharmakaya and Sambhogakaya. These two are not separate. The manifest nature of that emptiness is luminosity. So the nature of the emptiness, the way that the emptiness manifests is luminosity, and the essence of the luminosity is emptiness. So luminosity and emptiness are a unity. They are not separate, and since they are of one taste, there is no duality of the perceived and the perceiver. This is perceived non-dually, so it is called discerning, self-knowing awareness, in which the mind sees itself. That very sphere of the one taste of luminosity, emptiness. So that very sphere of the one taste of luminosity, emptiness, that's a phrase that I think is translated in numerous ways. Sometimes it's like the single sphere of one of the taste of luminosity, emptiness. But anyway, the same meaning. The very sphere of the one taste of luminosity, emptiness is the equal taste of the good and bad of samsara and nirvana. So there's no difference between the two of samsara and nirvana. Just that is the great perfection. And that is also Mahamudra, Prajnaparamita, Shunyata, suchness, and so on. These are all basically equivalent terms. In the mind stream of one who realizes this great perfection, impartial compassion and impartial pure vision emerge effortlessly and naturally. This all-pervasive compassion is the Nirmanakaya. So once one realizes this empty, luminous nature of the mind, compassion, and the vision or the skillful means of how to implement compassion arise spontaneously. We don't have to cultivate or generate compassion. It immediately exudes. The pristine awareness of the three kayas is just that. Recognize with certainty that it is nothing other than that. As long as there is vague uncertainty, realization of the nature of existence will never come. So you must ascertain this from within. This is the view of the great perfection. Meditation. So we have view, meditation, and conduct. Among the three, view, meditation, and conduct, the view is primary. So it is crucial to realize the unmistaken view. Without realizing the view, there is no basis for meditation. Once you have directly realized the unmistaken view, then comes the time to take it into practice by way of meditation. So we see this, the order of these given differently in different places. Often in our tradition, we see this idea of from within meditation, the view arises. So we start with meditation, and that seems to be more of a Mahamudra tradition. And the Dzogchen tradition is more of this type of from the view, then meditation arises. Either way, they have to come together. Rob,
So what we're talking about here is coming to as accurate a conceptual realization and developing that and then inserting that into our meditation. Is that what's happening here?
that is the big question. So, does the view mean just understanding it intellectually or conceptually? And if it means understanding it more than intellectually and conceptually, how do we give rise to that without meditation? Right? So that is the big question. And I think the answer from this tradition is that based upon the preliminaries that we all know about, the four revolutions of mind, the bodhicitta, and guru yoga or devotion, guru devotion, based upon that, receiving the pointing out transmission is the way that one gives rise to a non-conceptual glimpse of the view, I think, in this tradition. So then it's a question of how genuine is that glimpse, and what do we do with that glimpse? Because we all know, those of us who have received pointing out transmission, we know that that glimpse is not that clear at first. And it takes a lot of work to really sort of understand that glimpse and make it clear and strong. So it's a little bit of a chicken and an egg, isn't it? Yeah, yeah. But so let's say it's from within, upon the base. It might assume that the preliminaries include shamatha, and on the basis of shamatha, then one has the ability to gain a non, some non-conceptual glimpse of the view when it's pointed out. I think
Um,
that might be a Dylan accurate
yeah,
way
just
of.
I wonder what you think about this, Derek. I think so the view and the verb look, I understand are actually the same word in Tibetan. It's tawa, which can be a noun or a verb. So when it talks, the label of the section, the view would be that word tawa, and then when the first few lines talking about looking at the nature of your mind, the verb for to look is actually the same word there.
Are you sure of that?
Um, no. I know I don't know if that's true of this text because I don't have the Tibetan, but I know that that same word
In
is a noun and a verb in Tibetan.
yeah, yeah, it can be. It can be, but that's a good question. Often there's other words that are used for looking, like mikwa, mikpa. The eye looking. So, but that's an interesting point. So where did they use the word look? Look inward. Do not look outward. Yeah, that's an interesting question. We should figure that out. Yeah, let's work on that. So anyway, let's come back to the meditation. Without realizing the view, there's no basis for meditation. Once you have directly realized the unmistaken view, then comes the time to take it into practice by way of meditation. Diligently applying yourself to dwell for a long time in the sphere of the view that identifies your own essential nature is meditation. So diligently applying yourself to dwell for a long time in the sphere of the view. What is the sphere of the view? Is it that single sphere? Where was that? The very sphere of the one taste of luminosity, emptiness. In the sphere of the view that identifies your own essential nature as meditation, there's nothing else on which to meditate. Until your view turns into the expanse without counting the numbers of years and months, determined to devote your whole life to Dharma. That is what is the best of Dharma practitioners do. From the very outset, if you give lip service to the equality, free of conceptual elaboration and so on, while taking it easy without practicing in formal sessions, doing whatever you like, eating and lying about. In the end, there will be no difference between your freedom from conceptual elaboration and futility. Which says, I think indicates that there's sort of like levels or degrees of conceptual freedom from conceptual elaboration. That there can be genuine and sort of not genuine versions of that. And there's a great danger that you will sink into oblivion when you are about to die. Empty talk and boasting are useless, so in accord with sublime beings, be a humble Dharma practitioner, letting your conduct accord with your speech. Therefore, it is best if you retire to mountain solitude, or at least stay in a place where there are few distractions. Divide your time between formal sessions and post-meditative periods. And during delineated sessions of meditative equipoise, give up the 9 kinds of activity which are listed below and include all sorts of things that we think are good to do for Dharma practitioners, like nundro and mantras and sadhana practice and offerings, and all sorts of things should be given up. Including the 9th one, the secret activity of dwelling in mundane states of dhyana, of absorption states. Without being distracted outwardly and without grasping inwardly, rest evenly in your naturally settled indwelling nature. All appearances that arise as objects of the 5 senses are like reflections of planets and stars in the ocean. All appearances that arise as objects of the 5 senses are like reflections of planets and stars in the ocean. They appear without substance, right? Whatever arises, dwell in meditative equipoise in the expanse without grasping. The best of meditations does not have even the slightest object of intention, even though that is difficult for beginners. After a while, with gradual effort, it will emerge. During the post-meditative periods, train in emptiness, compassion, and the skill of recognizing phenomena to be like illusions and dreams. So this is like, in post-meditation, be a child of illusion. Strive as much as possible in Dharma practices and in the purifying obscurations in particular. So here we say, instead of giving up the 9 types of activity, here we're told to strive in Dharma practices. So I guess here we have post-meditative periods. Before, we didn't have any post-meditative periods. We had all meditation. In particular, it is a crucial point to direct your thoughts after meditation to the view which arose while in meditative equipoise. So here we have the indication that the view arises within meditative equipoise. Interestingly. So that your post-meditative experience is integrated with your formal sessions. Distinguish between the substrate and the Dharmakaya. What's the difference between the substrate and the Dharmakaya?
Substrate like Laya, the Alaya?
Yeah, the Alana. It's interesting to think about that. What's the difference between the substrate and the Dharmakaya? I mean, we know, the Dharmakaya is enlightened and the substrate isn't. Sue.
I read one piece where I think it was the translation committee was talking with Chogyam Trungpa about the Aliyah, and he said there's different. He seemed to say there were different levels of the Aliyah. So, and if you went too far, then you don't come back or something, like. So,
Yeah, he distinguishes there's an alia that's an indeterminate neutral ground, which is what the substrate is, and that's still within samsara and confused. And then there's an alia that is pure and is the basis from which enlightenment arises and all the virtues. Is sort of the place that Buddhahood lives, or is Buddha, sort of Buddha nature lives, is Buddha nature. And some traditions distinguish these two and some don't. But here we're presumably, we only have one alia in this system, and it would be a diluted one, which, so the alia is cloudy. It has subtle dualistic experience. It has, it's the storehouse, as we know, so and all that entails. Whereas the Dharmakaya is sort of the opposite. It's completely clear and knowing, non-dual, and it's, if anything, it's a storehouse of all Buddha qualities, as opposed to a storehouse of all the habitual tendencies and stored karmic energy.
I do have a question that keeps coming up, and I don't know if it can be answered, but does any knowing travel from another lifetime in terms of recognition of you or
Yeah, what do people think about that?
I think that's what tulkus do. And Rinpoches. It takes training, but just to recognize one is they find them because they see that they remember something.
Yeah, seems that way. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's retained from life to life, but we're not really aware until we're enlightened. We're not really aware of it, of what's retained. But when you become enlightened, then you remember everything. Everything's there.
but like when you meet the teacher and like that, is that a memory? Could that be a memory?
Meeting the teacher's not a memory, but I don't think that's what you're implying. I think you're saying is that is the connection that you have with a teacher that arises instantaneously because you have a memory of that teacher or someone like that teacher from a prior
Lineage.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's true.
Also, just among regular people, you have prodigies,
Yeah,
people that are
yeah. It's
incredibly
not
talented.
restricted to tulkus. Yeah,
I mean, people that aren't even like not necessarily spiritual prodigies, but like musical prodigies, athletes,
yeah, yeah,
mathematicians, who
yeah.
understand
Geniuses, child.
understand things when they're 4 years old. You know, um,
Many examples. Yeah, Mozart, Beethoven. Yeah, So distinguish between the substrate and the Dharmakaya. Did someone else raise their hand? Dylan.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question about that line again, the substrate consciousness. I'm wondering if yeah, something I always think about is like what the relationship is between the maybe this more experiential description of the substrate consciousness as kind of neutral, maybe somewhat unconditioned, but also somewhat dualistic. So the relationship between that and the role of the substrate consciousness as storing karmic seeds, like if those two properties like relate to each other or can be understood in light of each other, or if they're just sort of two different characteristics that are often talked about together.
Yeah, we all have seen them talked about together, those two characteristics. Um, I've never seen them talked about like as different, like levels of the substrate, though. I've never seen those aspects sort of distinguished as different sort of entities, but they very much do have those two qualities. Of one is sort of just the cloudy consciousness or unconsciousness, and the other is the receptacle. Although maybe like the cloudy consciousness is the alaya vijnana, and the alaya itself is just the receptacle.
Okay, so then there'd be three notions of Alaya. The,
What's the
yeah,
third?
the third would be like the in sometimes like in the Dharmakaya sense, right? Isn't it sometimes like in the Lojong slogan, rest in Alaya, rest in the nature of Alaya, the essence. It's not talking about the eighth consciousness there, right? I was assuming it was talking about something more basic or fundamental.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's where Trungpa Rinpoche discussed there being these two levels of Alaya that Sue's referring to, that the translation committee has on their website, this interaction between him, and he's saying that there's like a pure Alaya, and then there's this Alaya that's more diluted. And I, you know, when we say rest in the nature of Alaya, that's what's being pointed to, but it's not a realistic expectation until you're enlightened.
So there's those two, and then the Alaya Vijnana might be a third. So I guess that's how I was hearing the
I
possibility
see.
of three.
I see. Um, a third what though? Because one of them is a consciousness, and the other two are not consciousnesses.
I guess just third thing designated by the word Alaya, just for
Yeah,
the just
yeah,
understanding that term.
yeah. Related, three related entities. Yeah, and then there's in this famous text by Rangjung Dorje, there's Alaya Jnana, Alaya wisdom, which is the evolved state of the um, Buddha nature type Alaya, where the Buddha nature has blossomed into wisdom, Alaya Jnana. And so he gives this amazing description of these different players. We've looked at that text a couple of times, and I think it
And
was in the source book for our class at Profound Treasury. I think I had it in there. I didn't get to it in the class though, but I can circulate it again here for folks. It's really quite an interesting presentation.
and last clarification on that, and then I'll stop. Is do you think that's the same as the Alaya that's referred to in the Lojong slogan? So it's rest in the nature of Alaya as like the Alaya Jnana or the true wisdom Alaya.
I think it's not at all realistic to think that individuals who have not achieved the path of seeing could approach even the fundamental Alaya, much less the Alaya Jnana. And so that realistically, when we say rest in the nature of Alaya, our best attempt is to rest in the nature of Alaya Vijnana.
Okay, thank you. That's all very helpful.
Or like our impression of what it might be. Let's see. Once you have analyzed and recognized all the ways of mixing things up, going astray, or getting things wrong, been there, done that, as well as all faults and virtues, treasure your efforts to adopt virtues and reject faults. Those are the practices for the post-meditation, meditative periods. When you strive for a long time to practice in this way, whatever meditative experiences and appearances arise, such as bliss, luminosity, and non-conceptuality. So those are the famous three experiences that arise in the culminating stages of shamatha. And those are the nature of the alaya. The alaya in the sense of the basis of samsara alaya. Those three qualities are the nature of our minds, of a sentient being's mind. And then when you're enlightened, those qualities are transformed into the main qualities of Buddha nature, of wisdom, compassion, and capability. Anyway, do not appropriate them, or fixate on them, but ascertain them with the view and sustain your practice of resting naturally. Gradually, fine meditative experiences will increase and bad ones will cease. At the outset of each session, arouse bodhicitta, practice Guru Yoga, and take the four empowerments. And after each session, seal it with prayers of dedication. It's a funny phrase, take the four empowerments. It's like, take your aspirin and your vitamins. But these two paragraphs before, or the whole couple of pages before, are very advanced experiences, as we saw from the next text by Drupal Lama Karma, where he describes his experience of approaching and eventually accomplishing shamatha. So what's being described here is very advanced. At the outset of each session, these comprise the framework of meditation, as they are indispensable, in particular until you have reached the culminating stage of practice. The ground of non-meditation and your own pristine awareness has actually arisen as the guru. So you've actually recognized your own pristine awareness, and it becomes your guide, in the sense of a guru being one's guide. The crucial point to be embraced is to regard training in Guru Yoga as the main practice. So generating devotion to enlightened mind as the main practice. If you can practice each day in the yoga of 4 sessions, this traditional idea of having 4 sessions a day is a formal retreat practice, without being too tight or too loose. Without doubt, you will take hold of the fortress of eternal rest in the culmination of all 5 kinds of meditative experiences, and so on, as taught by Vimala Mitra. So there's a text by Vimala Mitra called Stages of Meditation, and it presents these 5 stages, which are below, and which come down to us, should be quite familiar. The 5 are turbulence, sometimes called waterfall, attainment, sometimes described as a fast-moving river. Familiarity is a slow-moving river. Stability is the place where the river joins with the ocean, and then culmination is the ocean, unmoving. Even if not, if there are some who apply just a moderate degree of effort in this practice. So here the author sort of tones things down a little bit, sort of after giving sort of the instructions for those with highest capabilities. He dials it back to the rest of us, so to speak. While mostly just engaging in hearing and reflection, they will experience less clinging to the 8 mundane concerns and will spend their lives in a relaxed, cheerful manner. They will have taken the first step of the path, and before long, they will surely be liberated in the eternal ground of omniscience. There's one word there that's highly qualified, and that word is long. Before long. That's a very relative term, that length of time, before long. Long can be like 3 countless aeons, or somewhere in between a lifetime and 3 countless aeons. Conduct. Then to give a partial account of the conduct during the times when you're dwelling in meditative equipoise in that way, when fresh thoughts suddenly emerge or else crop up subliminally, as opposed to non-fresh thoughts. Perceive their emergence from the sphere of your own pristine awareness. So this is conduct. Conduct is, as in the 3 words of Garb Dorje, where the first one is recognize your nature. The second one is go back to the first step, is have confidence in your nature. Recognize your nature as the first one, and then meditate on your nature. Meditate in the nature of mind. And then the third one is liberate whatever arises. So here, that's the conduct. Whatever thoughts arise, perceive their emergence from the sphere of your own pristine awareness. See how they're just arising from pristine awareness. Do not follow after them, and whether they're good, bad, pleasurable, miserable, and so forth, don't do anything. Rather, on page 254, as soon as you see them arise, rest in the nature of just that which has arisen. So without doing anything to them, without contrivance, without meditation, without intervention. By resting naturally, thoughts will disappear by themselves, no suppressing, no encouraging, and you will return to the pristine awareness you had experienced earlier. Then sustain the practice of resting naturally as before. Recognize, remain, and liberate. Thus, whatever good and bad thoughts arise, do not fixate on them, but let them arise and be released by themselves. However, thoughts are released in any of the 3 ways. So, in the footnote, the 3 ways thoughts are released are as follows. First, thoughts are released simply upon being recognized. When we recognize that we're thinking, immediately the energy and the momentum is reduced significantly. By the power of familiarization is number 2. Thoughts release themselves like a snake unraveling oneself. When one is familiar with the feeling of being caught by thoughts. So you miss the recognition of their emergence, but you recognize, oh, this is thought energy. And as soon, again, it's another type of recognition, but really it's like a slight moment later. 3, in the culminating phase, so it's like in the beginning, in the middle, and the end. In the culminating phase, there is no way thoughts can help or harm you. Even if you don't recognize them, even if you don't experience the familiarity of being in thought, as long as you know that there's no harm in thoughts, there's absolutely no difference between thought and mind, then it's like a thief who comes into an empty house. It's like the thoughts can't do anything. because you're not protecting your mind from the thoughts. You're not protecting anything from thought, as if there's some like other part of your mind that can be interrupted by thought or disturbed by thought or stolen by thought, like a thief in a house, where there's nothing the thief can do. In this final phase, thoughts empower your realization of pristine awareness, serving as aids to your practice. So instead of thoughts being a problem, thoughts become an aid when you realize that thoughts can't actually disturb your mind. Sue.
He has these as 3 here, but in other places, that last line is the 4th, which is that thoughts can be an aid.
Oh, okay, thanks.
In the, yeah, I was
Cool.
just listening to that.
Neat. Let's see. The one point is that they self-arise and self-release. Even though thoughts occur, they arise from the expanse of the Dharmakaya, the empty space of the Dharmakaya mind. Even though thoughts stop, they cease in the expanse of pristine awareness. So they arise from the empty aspect and they cease in the cognitive, luminous aspect of pristine aware quality of mind. If you know their arising does no harm, and you know how to let them release themselves, you will receive a special enhancement of the view, seeing that movement and stillness are not different. When you make efforts in this way, thoughts will decrease, even as it does no harm to the grounded being should they arise. With this process, the lowest, middling, and supreme modes of release will gradually come, which presumably is the opposite order of the 3 that we just looked at. But if the crucial points for the modes of release are missing, liberation will never be attained in the end. If you don't know how to release fixation, then even the recognition of the view and the meditation will not have the impact that we want. Knowing how thoughts are released is the best conduct. So much for like the 10 virtues and avoiding the 10 non-virtues. Just release your thoughts. As for the results of practicing in that way, mental afflictions and thoughts gradually thin out. Clinging to the 8 mundane concerns diminishes, and admiration, reverence, and pure vision gradually increase. Dreams are apprehended, and the clear light appears. Such are authentic fruitions of the path. On the other hand, such things as visions of deities, receiving prophecies, and the arising of extrasensory perception may or may not be fruitions of the path. If we cannot tell the right ones from the wrong, we will be deceived by Mars. Do not wait for such things, just let them go. Finally, on the verge of death or in the intermediate or transitional phase of the actual nature of reality, recognize the appearances of the ground and take hold of the fortress in that very ground. That's sort of like rest in the nature of Alaya. And in that case, it's the real Alaya, because he's talking about the transitional phase where we enter the first real part of death is the nature of reality, the great white light. And take hold of the fortress in that very ground, then you will certainly be liberated. I have composed this summary of the view meditation of conduct simply in order not to rebuff a request by a friend. This is lip service about things I lack. So there are bound to be many errors. Therefore, please inquire of others. Please ask others who know what they're talking about, and investigate carefully for yourself. If there are a few points that are correct, I pray that this may enhance the practice of my friends and simply serve as a contributing condition for them to reach the culmination of the practice, so they will simultaneously be liberated altogether in the expanse of the eternal ground, accomplish the needs of themselves and others. And then we have the colophon. So let's skip to contemporary masters, Drupal Lama Karma. Born in 1953 in eastern Bhutan, near Pema Ling, a hidden land sacred to Padmasambhava. So Pema Ling is one of these hidden, there's many hidden lands of in the Tibetan tradition, the Himalaya tradition of, and this was one that Padmasambhava used to hide in when he needed some time off from overcoming demons and hiding terma. He began his formal education in language and Buddha Dharma at an early age under his father. By 13, he was already serving as a scribe in a royally commissioned project to create an edition of the Kanjur. The Kanjur is the collection of the teachings of the Buddha that the Tibetans created in Thimphu, the capital of Bhutan. Later, he returns to his region of his birth and begins intensive training in the Longning Chuling Monastery, practicing the 5 sets of 100,000 accumulations of the Longchen Nyingtik preliminaries, which is the Longchen Nyingtik version of the Nundro, where instead of the 400 for 100,000 practices, they do 5. They split the refuge and the bodhisattva vow, bodhicitta vow separately and do 100,000 of each. And then, of course, they both schemes do 1,000,000 of the Guru Yoga, not 100,000. But by the time he was 26, he had been introduced to his root guru, Lama Neljorpa Sonam Drukgyok. And Neljorpa means yogin. By this time, he was already an accomplished, his teacher was an accomplished master in Mahamudra and Dzogchen, having spent 9 years of study and retreat under the tutelage of masters from all traditions, followed by another 9 years of retreat in various places throughout Bhutan. His guru was the Tokden Sonam Cholek, who had been the tutor, to the 8th Komtrul, Dungu Gyu Nima. Upon meeting his guru, Lama Karma Tsampa Karma became one of his closest disciples and was put into a retreat for the next 3 years in a nearby charnel ground in the region of Tashiyangtse. He received transmission and instruction in several forms of chud practice, in the yogic conduct of equal taste, interesting practices, and the 6 yogas of Naropa in the Drikung Kagyu version of those instructions. He completed 2 3-month mantra retreats and then a 7-month additional retreat on the Rizin Dupa and a 100-day retreat on the 4 reminders. He also studied extensively, received instructions in many Mahayana texts, and also the key practices of the Nyingma tradition, the liberation upon hearing in the intermediate state, which is the technical translation of the text that we know as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Bardo Tudril. And he also studied texts by Jujum Rinpoche, and he's also studied songs of Milarepa, the 3 points or phrases that strike the points by Garib Dorje I just talked about, and then Tolopa's famous text, the Mahamudra, Ganges Mahamudra, Gangama instructions on Mahamudra on the banks of the Ganges River from Talopa to Naropa. While he was at the charnel ground, he received detailed instructions on the 9 stages of shamatha, and they were instructed to put these into practice in short periods of retreat right away. And when he expressed his desire to actually accomplish shamatha, different than like learning about it and doing little retreats, but actually accomplish it, his teacher was delighted and set out a strict regimen for him to follow in order to accomplish that. He was first guided through a practice to purify the body, speech, and mind. And then after passing a test related to that, with respect to his proficiency in that practice, he was granted instructions on how to investigate whether the mind truly has any origin, location, or destination. We've heard this practice in many different contexts. Look for the origin, location, and destination of thoughts, of mind. After several months of this, his guru taught him how to identify the triad of stillness, movement, and awareness, that famous triad that constitutes one of the 2 main systems for Mahamudra instruction and practice, which the translators say is similar to taking the mind as the path by Dujam Lingpa, which we went through last week. And following this, he was introduced to the actual nature of mind. So he received, pointing out, transmission, so that he'd be ready to engage in the core practice of shamatha without a sign, which is a sign that the pointing out leads to the practice of shamatha without a sign, interestingly. Not simply as it is held in common with the Sutrayana, but as it is embedded or understood deeply within the context of the Mahamudra Dzogchen traditions. Such practice of shamatha without a sign prepares one for the prerequisite stability of meditation to sustain the view of cutting through, which is the first of the 2 formal Dzogchen practices, the second being the leaping over practice. He then entered a period of 6 or 7 months in extremely strict retreat within a sealed hut. He only emerged in the middle of the night to fetch water when no one else was around to encounter at the charnel ground. It was followed by about 5 years during which his challenge was to integrate his conduct into his conduct, the meditative equipoise he had attained in strict sealed retreat. So to maintain that state of mindfulness, of shamatha, in what we would call post-meditation. In the first year after retreat, he completed another 7-month retreat. So he didn't really end his retreat, he just took a little break and then did another retreat. And he also practiced in frightening places, haunted by many spirits, like Sleepy Hollow. That's why I live here and I practice here. It's a very advanced practice. I live right across the street from the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. He spent many months focused on the Dzogchen practices of cutting through and the direct crossing over. And then he was asked to serve as the scribe for a renowned Teratun Pe Gyel Lingpa. And he spent years of active Dharma service, 4 years doing this, in a constant practice of mindfulness, though not in strict retreat. He said it was a kind of retreat since he was not engaged in any mundane activities. Let's see. He bestowed various oral transmissions of that Teratun's teachings, even while that Teratun was alive. He was appointed to do that. And then after his passing away, he became the retreat master of his center and did a number of 3-year retreats. And then I think to this day remains the 3-year retreat master at that monastery in Bhutan. Continued to serve as the retreat master. In all, 18 years devoted to a life of retreat. Extensive teachings, transmissions from Kagyu Nyingma masters, including Dujum Rinpoche, both 1617 Karmapas, Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. He is married, as consort, who is Kondro Tsering Drolkar. Drolkar is a white Tara, and lives with his family near Paro, Bhutan, implying that they have children, guiding disciples in retreat in Bhutan and elsewhere. Experiential instructions on shamatha. Any comments? Was there? No?
Yeah, so he would
So,
have been doing this in like the 70s, 80s, 90s?
well, his guru passed away in 1988. And so then after that, he did 2 3-year retreats, 6 years. That takes him to 94. And then from then until now, he's been the retreat master there for some 30 years, I guess.
Mm.
Yeah. So he visited apparently Santa Barbara, California upon the invitation of Lama Alan Wallace in 2019. And he was asked the completely inappropriate request of speaking openly about his meditative experiences, which I think Alan had spoken to the Dalai Lama about beforehand, and knew that it was very unusual request and very unusual for lamas to speak about their experiences, but he felt it would really be of help. And I think I remember him saying that he was encouraged by the Dalai Lama, and given that backing, I think Lama Karma felt he ought to do so. So he spilled the beans in this amazing way. In general, I don't like talking about my experiences, not even my dreams, and my Lama would be not pleased. They say that someone who does this is a jaded practitioner who spills from the mouth, whose mind is incorrigible and untamed by the Dharma. There's no custom to talk about these things publicly. And now it's in a book, publicly available book. At first, Alan distributed this text in a restricted manner, this manuscript, only to people who were doing his 4-year retreat on the Vajra essence. But now it's publicly available in this book. When he asked me to talk about what teachings I'd requested from my Lama while I was practicing my shamatha, and what kinds of certainties arose through that practice, including the conjoined practices of shamatha and vipassana. So I'll explain the different methods of shamatha, including shamatha with a sign, without a sign, and the Shravaka's way of meditating. There are many different methods taught by the lamas of the past. I will first discuss the way of meditating that relies upon counting the breaths, which is said to be one of the ways to establish shamatha. Normally, we've never tried to take care of or control our minds with our minds, but we let our minds follow after whatever thoughts and appearances come up. This is how the ordinary mind operates. But if we're going to meditate, we have to take care of our minds. And a method for that is to count the breaths, which leads to good experiences, proper ascertainments, and clarity of mind. Trungpa Rinpoche mentions counting the breaths early on in the 73 seminaries. He says, while it's traditionally a very core practice and helpful, he didn't think it was necessary for us to do that. On 262, the mind is like the king of the body, speech, and mind. The king is the king of the mind and the body and the speech. It has great strength and tremendous ability, but little ability to place limits on itself. Therefore, when the time comes to meditate, we must reach the point where we can bring the mind under control. When you're able to do this, then gradually your mind turns inward and does not follow freely after thoughts. Little by little is corralled within, so you must train your mind to be able to settle in its own place. When we practice counting the breaths, once we become well experienced in that, then with no need to continue counting the breaths, the mind naturally settles. Normally in our daily lives, the mind becomes distracted by an amazing number of thoughts. But when we have cultivated shamatha, there's a state of mind with no thoughts at all, which marvelously you can experience with ease. With ease. Once you've achieved shamatha, you can go there, but it would be difficult to go there all at once. So as a method for going there, we train in dependence upon the respiration. Like ascending a staircase one step at a time, you cannot get to the second step without reaching the first, and without reaching the second step, you cannot ascend to the third. So just like gradually ascending a staircase, you need to understand the stages of the path, and then the shamatha of those who have gone through the process of developing good habits will become stable. This is a special method for making progress in shamatha. So this text is probably the most relevant in the book for us, because it's a very personal and revealing account of someone who's practicing shamatha, as opposed to many of the more advanced practices that we've come upon and will. Count one breath for each full cycle of exhalation and inhalation. Don't count two for one exhalation and one inhalation. For example, if you exhale and then inhale in a very relaxed way, that is called one cycle of respiration. So in the beginning, count each of those up to 7 cycles of breath. So count from 1 to 7, one count for each cycle of in and out. Don't count a lot of breaths, for this will create obstacles from the conceptualization that arises in between. Too much thought involved in going past 7, he says. So there are various traditions. Some traditions go to 10, some traditions go much higher, some traditions go backwards from 10 to 1. Although thoughts continue to arise, here is a method so that you do not fall under their domination. You merge the many thoughts into just one thought for each cycle of the respiration. I've never heard that before. That's pretty interesting. So don't try to have no thoughts, but try to bring your thoughts into simplicity of one thought for each cycle. Like many streams merging into one Ganges river. Then in the course of counting one cycle of respiration, thoughts will still be there, but once you've channeled them together, you make them into one thought, and then gradually it will be easy to reach stability. If you continue to let your mind follow after all the various thoughts of the 3 times, past, present, and future, you will not be able to stabilize your shamatha. For beginners, it's best to count just 7. For the siddhas of the past have said that one should have short sessions and many of them. He doesn't explain the relevance of that. He doesn't is 7 breaths a session? It almost implies that. But anyway, this is great. There is great value in this. I have much experience in this regard. When you think, now I'm going to meditate, and then stay there meditating for a very long time, sometimes the mind wanders around in the past, present, and future, with an emphasis on the sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's clear and undistracted, but you cannot remain there. Rather, when counting the breaths, you should think, I might make a mistake, and really focus as you exhale and then inhale. And when you make your mind remain on that, you gather all the thoughts together into a single thought, with the concern that you might lose count when you sustain this mindfulness. Then in this meditation there is the mindfulness of shamatha, which is without forgetfulness. A little bit unclear, but then with each exhalation and inhalation, count once, maintaining your mindfulness with the constant concern that you might lose count. If you count more than 7, thoughts will infiltrate your mindfulness. But as a start, as one successfully counts from 1 to 7 again and again, after becoming trained in this, without ever becoming distracted by infiltrating thoughts when counting from 1 to 7, then you can count up to 12. Thus, you lengthen it. It doesn't say like gradually increase, but that probably is the way to go. Rob.
So at Nalanda Bodhi, we have this practice as part of the meditation. And what what strikes me is he starts with the exhale.
Oh, you don't start with the exhale.
Now we start with the inhale.
Interesting.
Inhale, exhale, one. Or at least that's how
Oh,
I did it. I'm wondering now if I messed it up.
interesting. Do you think it matters?
I don't know. You know? I don't know. Also, we went to 10.
Yeah, that is more common. I've heard that more commonly. But did it work?
I thought it was a good practice. Uh, uh,
Cool.
we spent like, 2 or 3 weeks on it every day. Um,
Neat.
yeah.
Neat. Thank you. Dylan.
I feel like I want to understand this idea better of gathering multiple thoughts into one. I mean, do you think, can you imagine an example of that? Like, is it like,
Yeah, what do we imagine? So I thought there's two possibilities. One is that you try to think about what number you're on, and like think about the breath and the number. And the other thought I had was that um, maybe you sort of gap out and you think about food or something, and instead of like having thoughts about, oh, I'm not supposed to think about food, you just let go and think just about that. You sort of try to stay with that one thought, and then try to like um, let it come to a point of losing momentum, and then go back to the breaths, counting the breaths. And he doesn't say this anywhere, but my understanding of the practice is when you gap out, you start again at one. If you like lose track, so I would think that if you get drawn away by something, that you try to like focus on that something in a very intent way, and then when that sort of reaches it sort of plays itself out, the energy of being stuck on it, by recognizing it, then you come back and start at one again. What are you thinking? What do other people think? Cynthia.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because I guess I was thinking that what he was describing is that while you're counting, you may have thoughts that go along with counting, and that you may not be fully distracted, like completely lost. I would agree if you're fully distracted, you probably start back at one. But I was also kind of envisioning that you're having thoughts, between saying one and saying two, there's a few thoughts that might arise. And so you just sort of collect those in this funny gathering idea, which I agree that I sort of think they're talking about just kind of summarizing it into, like, you might have 5 different thoughts about food, but you just summarize it into food and let that be the thought. But then you then just keep going too. And then, you know, then maybe it's about movies. And then, 3, maybe it's just about breathing. That's getting a little closer, right? So I,
Rob. Oh, sorry.
yeah, that's it.
Well, do you
Yeah,
want to respond to that?
when I was doing it, I I kind of cheated, or I felt like I was cheating, because what I would do is I would extend the counting. I would go one,
That's what I was thinking. That you verbally internally like
yeah,
say
and
the
so
number
I would
through the
say
whole
I would say
breath.
on the breath and the number for as long as I
Yeah,
could.
I don't think that's cheating. That's what I imagine doing.
That's how I did it, and then also I would restart if I just had the slightest doubt if I was correct with the number. If I went 5 or 6, okay, back to 1.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. In other words, you lose track of what number you're on, even slightly,
Yeah,
doubt it, boom.
yeah. If I had a slight amount of doubt, I would start over. And then and that's where I got the impetus to like just extend the length of the internal vocalization of the number.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Just like the whole breath, you're saying one
Yeah.
internally. Yeah.
Exactly. And that and
Um,
then pretty much that crowds out anything else.
Chris, not Christopher Dillon, not Dylan Canal.
I was thinking it's the thought. So you're counting that brings you into shamatha, and the one thought that arises in shamatha, you should stop and start another cycle over. Don't go in and out of shamatha, because sometimes you can do that, right? I'm in shamatha, and all of a sudden you catch yourself in thoughts. Don't just jump back to shamatha, start over again, another cycle.
Yeah, I think that's similar to what Rob was saying. If you lose track at all by thoughts, he focused on losing track of the numbers, but I think it's the same thing. Just go back to zero. Cynthia.
I'm just curious about that idea of extending the numbers. Isn't that kind of blocking?
Yeah,
But is,
I think that's the idea.
That's why I kind of thought I was cheating because I
yeah, I mean, that, yeah, it seems like it's a little bit, you know, um, I don't know. I mean, it'd be interesting to clarify with an expert of this technique, but I would think that seems like it's a little bit not the point because you want to allow the thought, I mean, we're not trying to just squelch. That's generally not the practice of shamatha.
I
right
thought it
because
was. I thought the idea was by having one strong thought, it blocks out the many variety of thoughts.
Hmm.
That's what I understood from the way he described it. That you're
the
actually blocking. Sorry.
I'm sorry. The result is a little bit more silence when you do that. Because there's no, you know, it's actually there's another practice called taking thoughts as the object of meditation. So it's sort of related to that.
Yep. Sue.
Well, I kind of imagined like a parenthesis for each breath. So like, just real gentle, like a cloud. This is this little package, and then gone. And I also did kind of a counting on mostly the out breath and then open for the in. But I wanted to ask Rob, when you said you practiced this for a number of weeks, how long were your sessions?
Oh, sessions for about an hour.
And how many sessions a day?
One session a day for
One
an
session
hour.
a day. Thank you.
And I would do I would take short breaks. I wouldn't just do an hour of 1 to 10, 1 to 10, 1 to 10 without ever getting up, or
Hmm.
I wouldn't get up, but I would take a take a moment every now and then after 4 or 5 uh, rounds of 10, just take a breath, just sit and then start it up again. Um, but it was, yeah, it was basically an hour a day. It was part of like it was like a 2-year practice program, and that was one of them, one of the practices.
Mary Beth.
So this this bit about making all those thoughts one thought. That reminds me of the instruction that Rinpoche gave us that you just label everything thinking.
Mm.
That it's like, yeah, it's kind of all the same thinking. And I don't know, how that makes it easier to count, but I sort of feel like in a way, the technique that he taught us, where you just focus on the exhale, is like, well, you count one and you label everything as thinking, and then you count one and label. I see a similarity there. I find
Yeah, yeah.
it interesting.
That's interesting. Thank you. So one option is to have one continuous thought that's the same content, and the other option is just to consider thoughts of any content as being the same in that they are all thoughts. Yeah, that's cool. Okay. Should we go onward or more?
I just wanted to say I really, I really appreciate Sue's point about the parentheses and the little packets. Uh, I kind of wished I'd have thought of that. Now that I'm thinking of that, because I was that practice was kind of hard at first. Um, it was the closest thing at Shambhala was like the level 3 practice where you're very close in.
Yes, yeah, it's very much a close placement.
It's a close placement practice, and so the way you described what you were doing sounds like it opened it up a little bit, and that's something for me to chew on.
Chew on those clouds, they're very nutritious. So back on page 265, I think the second full paragraph towards the bottom. Normally during the first moment we're thinking about one thing, then during the next we're thinking about something else, and the third moment yet another thought arises. Since the mind isn't under control, we don't recognize that these thoughts are arising, for they're like water that spreads over their plain. But now, by counting the breaths, like draining all the water into one channel, thoughts are merged into the thoughts of counting, thus decreasing in number. Thoughts are merged into the thoughts of counting. Interesting phraseology. So you gather all the thoughts together and place them into the count. That's why I thought, like Rob, of just like one. When one follows the explanation from experience, meditating for a long time in that way, the result will come. If one has experience in meditation, then one knows the meditative experiences. That's a funny sentence. One understands. But if you just hear and talk a lot about meditation, you have no experience. A long time ago, I received from my Lama the instructions on how to meditate. Then I meditated a great deal. Later, when I was meditating near a river gorge, at first I would hear the sound of the river outside. But as my mind gradually calmed down or remained still, I would hear the sound of the river from within. I would hear all sounds within. Such experience arises through familiarization, and you need to know how far your meditation has progressed. A couple of interesting things there. One is that last statement of like knowing how far your meditation has progressed is somewhat foreign to us. We're taught to like not really be at all paying attention to like accomplishment, but I think he's coming at it from the angle of using that um, estimation of progress as a way to refine the practice. And then secondly, this thing of listening to waterfalls. There was a book on Chinese meditation by Take Care Dylan, by Charles Lu Kuan Yu, called Practical Buddhism, and also another one called Chinese meditation or something like that, experiences in Chinese meditation, where he translates these biographical accounts of meditators who go and meditate next to waterfalls. And at first, like the water is just like the sound is just like encompassing them and overwhelming, and then gradually going through these phases of like it's receding until finally they don't even hear the water, interestingly. And here he says, I hear the sounds within. And I wonder if that's a similar experience, just described differently, or if he like still is hearing this huge sound, but like it feels like it's coming from a different place. Sue.
I was wondering about that. Is it whether he was kind of saying that all the sounds, I'm realizing they're all coming experienced in the same place inside, that the stuff isn't out there, that kind of thing.
It does seem that way, that's what he's saying, that
But then
sound
yeah,
happen,
then he talks
happens
about hearing
internally.
your heart and
Yeah,
stuff. So
yeah, which is internal, right? Normally, we don't notice tiny sounds, but when meditating with familiarization over a long period of time, on occasion you'll very clearly experience momentary sounds like that of your own heart beating. Hopefully, we've all had that happen, right? Every once in a while, you hear your heart beating or your blood flowing, that sort of thing, which we don't normally hear when we're doing other things. When we do, this is a sign that conceptualization has subsided. Once it has subsided, various sensations and experiences continually arise. Once you brought your respiration to a pace that is slow and gentle, that is enough. You do not need to make the breath faster or slower. You don't need to breathe more quickly. Breathe gently with your mind relaxed and happily settled. After you've practiced a lot in that way, when your practice of shamatha is going well, then sounds like that of the wind, cars, airplanes, and human voices will be experienced inside. When you focus outside, outer appearances will be unimpeded and luminous, like a drawing made of rainbows. Then when you look at visual objects such as mountain, rivers, snow, sky, gardens, forests, they will appear as though luminous and empty. Meanwhile, when you look inwardly, it will seem as though everything is of the nature of emptiness and luminosity, with nothing to be seen. When you meditate on the union of these two, outer and inner, all sounds will be experienced from within. This comes from a great deal of shamatha meditation. If you have not yet reached even just a single pointed stage, you won't understand these things. From shamatha, you go to the single pointed yoga, and you eventually progress to the yoga of one taste and the yoga of non-meditation. He skipped the yoga of simplicity for some reason. This is the way to progress in Mahamudra. So you have to get to the single pointed yoga, right? This is a practice for arriving at shamatha, the single pointed yoga. So we have to understand these things, which I explained earlier. Another sign of progress is that you can remember events from previous lifetimes, or else from a long time ago in this lifetime that you had completely forgotten. When you're cultivating shamatha, it is possible for the memory of them to return. There's a story of one great meditator who lent a book to his friend and he forgot about it for many years. And then one day when he was meditating, the thought suddenly arose, oh, one day years ago I lent a book to so-and-so. He remembered this. This is good meditation. You can remember anything. It's a little bit of a funny story. Like that doesn't sound like a great story to me, where a guy lends somebody a book and remembers, hey, you never gave me that book back. But anyway, Miller says, please doubt the mistake of thinking self-emergent, spontaneous effulgence and many memories showing up directly are all just about the same. So why don't we stop there and contemplate whatever the hell that means? It's not a particularly clear quote in my mind. And I think that's enough from that text. We'll just go on because the rest of it's not very interesting. Just kidding. Just kidding. Yeah, so we'll continue next week, obviously, and go through the whole thing because it is amazing. Thank you very much. Any comments or questions or concerns? Shall we close with the dedication? Or was that saying goodbye, or you wanted to say something, Chiprin? Yeah. Okay, so let's dedicate. By this merit, may all attain omniscience, may defeat the enemy wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara. May I free all beings by the confidence of the golden sun of the great east. May the lotus garden of the Rigden's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. Thank you, everyone. Great to see you. Take care and see you next week.
Thank you. Good night.